The grand dining hall of the Hayes mansion shimmered under the light of an opulent chandelier, but the air was anything but celebratory. Ryan, the young millionaire, sat at the far end of the table, his plate untouched. His parents, Marcus and Evelyn, sat opposite him, their expressions heavy with purpose. Tonight wasn't about family bonding. It was about sealing a deal that would change Ryan's life forever. Ryan, Marcus began, his voice sharp yet calculated. It's time you step into your role in this family. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before delivering the bombshell. We've arranged for you to marry Olga Petrova. She's the daughter of Russia's most powerful oil tycoon. Ryan's breath caught. Marry? Olga Petrova? A woman 18 years older than him, whom he'd never even met. The room seemed to shrink as his father continued. This union will solidify the future of our company. It's not just a marriage, it's a strategic alliance. Disbelief turned to anger as Ryan stood abruptly. You can't be serious, he exclaimed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. You're asking me to sacrifice my life, my happiness, for the company? I'm not just a pawn in your business empire. Marcus's expression darkened, his voice cold and unwavering. This isn't about what you want, Ryan. It's about what's best for this family. Refuse, and you'll be on your own. No support. No inheritance. The ultimatum hit Ryan like a blow to the chest. His heart raced, anger and pain colliding within him. So that's how little I mean to you? He said, his voice trembling. I'm just a means to an end? Without waiting for an answer, Ryan stormed out of the room, grabbing his car keys and leaving the suffocating confines of the mansion behind. The night air was cool against his flushed skin as he sped down the empty highways, the city lights fading in his rearview mirror. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he needed to escape. Hours later, he found himself in Fair Haven, a quiet coastal town far removed from the world he knew. The salty breeze and the sound of waves crashing against the shore brought a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, Ryan allowed himself to breathe. The next morning, Ryan wandered into a quaint little cafe with a hand-painted sign that read Seaside Cafe. Inside, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. Behind the counter stood Emily, her hair tied in a messy bun, her apron dusted with flour, and her smile warm and inviting. Good morning, she greeted, her voice light and genuine. What can I get for you? Ryan found himself smiling for the first time in days. Coffee, please. Whatever you recommend. As she prepared his drink, Ryan observed the cafe's simple charm. Shelves lined with used books, walls adorned with vintage photos, and regulars chatting like old friends. Emily moved with ease, her interactions with customers full of warmth and sincerity. You're not from around here, are you? She asked, handing him his coffee. No, Ryan admitted, carefully choosing his words. Just passing through. Needed a break from the big city. Emily nodded knowingly. Fair Haven's good for that. Things are simpler here. Their brief conversation stayed with Ryan as he left the cafe. Emily's quiet strength and authenticity were unlike anything he'd encountered in his world of wealth and ambition. But beneath her calm exterior, he sensed a story, something unspoken that mirrored his own struggles. As Ryan settled into the rhythm of Fair Haven, he couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Emily was more than just chance. Little did he know, their worlds were about to collide in ways that would change them both forever. The Seaside Cafe became more than just a place for coffee. It became a sanctuary for Ryan, a world away from the suffocating expectations of his family. Day after day, he found himself drawn back, not just for the comforting simplicity of the cafe but for Emily, the woman who ran it with effortless grace. She had a warmth that was rare, an authenticity that stood in stark contrast to the calculated personas he was used to. First, their conversations were light, a comment about the weather, a playful joke about his city ways. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. Ryan started to open up, sharing small pieces of his life. He told her about the pressures of his family, how every decision in his life felt predetermined, but he kept the larger truths hidden. He didn't mention the arranged marriage looming over him, the wealth he'd left behind, or the ultimatum his father had issued. Emily, in turn, began to share more about herself. One afternoon, as the golden light of sunset streamed through the cafe windows, she wiped her hands on her flour-dusted apron and sat across from Ryan. Her voice was soft but steady as she said, "My father was not a good man. He was an oil tycoon, powerful and ruthless. When everything fell apart, so did we. People lost their livelihoods because of him, and the town. Well, they've never forgotten." She hesitated, glancing out the window before continuing. "After he went to prison, I had to take care of Jack. He was just a kid then. I gave up everything, my art, my dreams, just to make sure he had a stable life. But even now, I feel like I'm still living in my father's shadow. Sometimes, I wonder if I'll ever escape it." Ryan's chest tightened. He could hear the pain in her voice, the weight she carried, and it struck a chord deep within him. He knew what it was like to feel defined by someone else's choices, to feel trapped by a legacy he never asked for. But as much as her story resonated with him, he kept his own truths locked away. The guilt gnawed at him. Emily's openness only highlighted the secrets he was keeping. The arranged marriage his parents had planned for him, the life of privilege he'd turned his back on, and the looming deadline that threatened to cut him off completely. How could he fall for someone like her while hiding so much of himself? Meanwhile, Emily was facing her own struggles. Her father's lawyer had become increasingly persistent, urging her to claim the inheritance he had left behind. The money could change everything. It could secure Jack's future, pay for his college, and even give her the chance to open the art studio she had always dreamed of. But accepting it would mean tying herself to a name that had caused so much pain. The whispers in the town didn't help. Old wounds resurfaced as people gossiped about her connection to her father. Emily tried to brush it off, but the judgment stung. She confided in Ryan one evening as they closed the cafe together. "I don't know if I can take it," she said, her voice heavy with doubt. "The money would help Jack, but what if it makes people think I'm just like him? What if it ties me to everything I've worked so hard to leave behind?" Ryan wanted to comfort her, to tell her he understood, but the weight of his own secrets held him back. He could see how much she trusted him, and the thought of losing that trust terrified him. At the same time, the pressure from Ryan's own family was mounting. His parents had called again, reminding him of the deadline. If he didn't return and agree to the marriage, he would lose everything: his inheritance, his position in the company, and the support of the only family he'd ever known. The thought of going back filled him with dread, but so did the idea of staying in Fair Haven while keeping his true identity hidden from Emily. Then, one fateful afternoon, Emily unknowingly gave Ryan the clarity he needed. They were sitting at a small table near the window, the sun casting warm shadows across the cafe. She was telling him about a conversation she'd had with Jack, about how she once feared she'd become like her father. "But then I realized," she said, her eyes meeting his, "we're not defined by their choices. You're not your father. You get to choose who you want to be." Her words hit Ryan like a bolt of lightning. For so long, he'd let his father's expectations dictate his life, believing he had no choice but to follow the path laid out for him. But Emily was right, he did have a choice. As she walked away to tend to another customer, Ryan stayed at the table, staring out at the ocean. Her words echoed in his mind. "You're not your father. You get to choose who you want to be." For the first time, he began to question whether running away was enough, or if he needed to confront his family and make a stand for the life he truly wanted. But even as Ryan felt the stirrings of change, the guilt of his hidden truth loomed larger than ever. Emily had opened her heart to him, sharing her deepest fears and vulnerabilities, and yet he still couldn't bring himself to tell her everything. How would she react when she learned he was the heir to a fortune, that he was running from a life of privilege and responsibility, and that he had come to Fair Haven not just to escape, but to hide? The waves crashed against the shore as Ryan sat in silence, wrestling with his thoughts. He knew the time was coming when he'd have to make a choice. Not just about his family, but about Emily, about the life he wanted, and about the man he wanted to be. The growing bond between them was undeniable, but the secrets they both carried threatened to unravel everything. Would their connection be strong enough to survive the truth, or would their worlds prove too different to bridge? Ryan didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Emily's words had sparked something inside him, and for the first time, he was ready to face the questions he'd been running from his entire life. The truth has a way of catching up with us, and for Ryan, that moment had arrived. One evening, as the waves crashed against the shore, he finally sat Emily down at her favorite spot on the beach. His voice was steady but tinged with fear. "Emily," he began. His gaze locked on hers. "I need to tell you everything. My name isn't just Ryan. I'm Ryan Hayes, heir to one of the biggest tech companies in the country. My family expects me to marry someone I don't love, someone they chose to secure a business deal. I left because I couldn't do it. I couldn't live a life that wasn't mine. And then I met you." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You've changed the way I see the world, the way I see myself. But I was scared to tell you. I didn't want to lose you." Emily's face remained unreadable as she processed his words. There was hurt. He had kept so much from her. But beneath it, she saw his vulnerability, his struggle. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I won't lie, Ryan. It hurts that you didn't trust me with this earlier. But I get it. I know what it's like to feel trapped by expectations. What matters now is what you do next. Not for me, not for your family, but for you." Her words struck a chord in him. For the first time, Ryan felt the strength to face his family and the life he'd been running from. Meanwhile, Emily had her own reckoning to face. The day of her father's board meeting arrived, and with Ryan's words of encouragement echoing in her mind, she walked into that boardroom with her head held high. The room was filled with stern faces, some of whom had worked alongside her father during his rise and his downfall. When the lawyer outlined the terms of her inheritance, Emily didn't flinch. "I'll accept it," she said, her voice steady, "but on my terms. A portion of this money will be used to fund programs for young artists and underserved communities. If this money is going to mean something, it's going to help others, not just me." Her bold stance surprised the board but earned their reluctant respect. As she walked out of the room, she felt lighter, as though she had finally stepped out from under her father's shadow. But the gossip in Fairhaven reignited with a vengeance. Whispers about her father's legacy and the inheritance she claimed spread quickly. One afternoon, as she worked in the cafe, a customer made a snide comment loud enough for everyone to hear. Before Emily could respond, Ryan, who was seated nearby, stood up. "If you knew half of what Emily has done for this town and her family, you wouldn't dare say that," he said, his voice firm but composed. "She's not her father. She's someone who's worked harder than most of us will ever understand. Maybe instead of judging her, you should try being a little more like her." The cafe fell silent, and the customer muttered an apology before leaving. Emily looked at Ryan, her eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing the world alone. But Ryan had one more decision to make. A few days later, he called his father. "I'm not coming back," he said firmly. "I'm not marrying Olga, and I'm not living my life by your rules. I'm done." His father's response was cold, as Ryan expected. "Then you're on your own," Marcus said before hanging up. But instead of fear, Ryan felt a sense of freedom he'd never experienced before. Now free from his family's expectations, Ryan poured all his energy into building a new life in Fairhaven. With Emily's support, he decided to open a small inn, a cozy retreat that would bring peace to others the way Fairhaven had brought peace to him. At a community event to celebrate the opening of the inn, Ryan took the microphone. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "This town saved me. It gave me a second chance. And one person here showed me what it means to be true to yourself. He turned to Emily, who stood in the crowd, her eyes wide with surprise. Emily, you've changed my life in ways I can't even begin to explain. You've shown me what it means to love, to believe, and to fight for something real. Ryan stepped off the stage, pulling a small box from his pocket as he approached her. The crowd gasped as he knelt down on one knee. Emily, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face as she laughed and nodded. Yes, Ryan. 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in cheers as Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. For the first time, both of them felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. Months later, they stood on the beach at sunset, hand in hand, as their small inn flourished. Emily's art studio had also become a haven for young artists, fulfilling a dream she had once thought impossible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, their children played in the sand, their laughter echoing across the beach. Ryan looked at Emily, a soft smile on his face. I never thought my life would look like this. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, her voice full of warmth. Sometimes, the life we're meant to live is the one we never planned for. The waves crashed gently against the shore as they sat together, watching the world fade into twilight. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Together, they had built a life rooted in love, authenticity, and the courage to choose their own path. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales. Your support keeps us going.